Introduction to Evolutionary Psychology, Sex Differences in Reproduction. Professor Michael Botwin, Department of Psychology, California State University, Fresno. In this unit, I'm going to explain the conflict between the sexes. Why can't men and women ever get along? Why can't they see fundamentally eye to eye? Now, I'm not going to solve this problem for you. If I could do that, I'd win the Nobel Prize and I wouldn't be making these videos right now. I'm going to have fun explaining to you the basic biological differences, ones you may not have been thinking of, between men and women and how they drive our behavior. So, let's start with size. Because whenever you think of human sexuality, well, the old colloquial thing is size matters. And when we're talking about the conflict between the sexes, size really matters. Here we go. Let's look at this. We have here the largest cell in the female's body, or at least one of them, the ovum, surrounded by multiple male sperm cells. They're very small, they're tiny. You can see that the ovum dwarfs the sperm. This is the size that matters in sex differences. Let's talk about why. Female reproduction consists of large sex cells, the ovum. They're sturdy, they're relatively immobile, however they're nutrient rich. Women produce them in limited quantities. So the best choice to make with an expensive commodity that's in limited resources is to be especially choosy and selective in how you use that resource. Furthermore, for females, reproduction is far more costly. You have the physical cost of reproduction, and in mammals like us, that means internally gestating the baby, carrying it to term. And one of the most helpless creatures on the face of this planet is a newborn human infant. And typically the mother's primary responsibility after the birth of the baby is to take care of it for an extended period of time. After all, she also has the breast to nourish the baby and has to do that for several months before the baby can be weaned. All of this takes a great toll on the woman's body. Furthermore, women will probably use approximately 400 of their ovum during their reproductive years, although they produce many, many, many more potential ovums. Now, the one thing that females have going for them is they're always certain of maternity. They've had the baby last, they know it's theirs. That becomes a major component of evolutionary psychology thinking. Now let's contrast that with the cost of reproduction for males. And males have small sex cells, sperm. They're fragile. They're highly mobile, but they're nutrient poor. Males produce them in massive quantity. The average male ejaculate consists of well over 1 million sperm. So you have a cheap resource that is easily available. What do? You indiscriminately use it as the best strategy. Furthermore, as they say from an evolutionary perspective, reproduction is cheap for males. There's the marginal cost of reproduction. Robert Winston, who you've seen in videos in this class, makes the point, as only the English can, that for a man to reproduce, it takes as much energy as brewing a cup of tea. For women, the cost is much, much higher, as we've already stated. Now, men have virtually unlimited reproductive resources. From the onset of puberty on to death, men can reproduce, albeit old guy sperm not as good as young guy sperm. But there's one nagging thing that historically has nagged males, not only of our species, but of other species. Certainty of paternity. Is the offspring mine? Is it another male's? Is it the pool boys? The male persons? Best friends? Well, now we can figure that out with DNA testing, but you have to remember, for the vast quantity of our existence as a species, this was not possible. Well, let me talk about several individuals that really show this idea of reproduction and the cost. First of all, we have the rock and roller Mick Jagger, who's still going at it in his 70s. Jagger has 8 children. He was born in 1943 during World War II in England. He's fathered 8 children. There's a 46-year age gap between his youngest child and his oldest child. In other words, his oldest child could conceivably be his youngest child's grandmother. He was 27 years old when he had his first child, 73 when he had his last. Now, only rich and powerful guys can usually pull something like this off, and Jagger has an estimated worth of $500 million. So here is Jagger's oldest daughter, KARIS Hunt Jagger. She was born in 1970. Here is the latest addition to the Jagger family, DEVERAUX OCTAVIAN BASIL Jagger. Now, DEVERAUX was born in 2016, so he's 4 years old right now, which means Dad is now 77. Contrast that to a female wealthy superstar woman, Cher. Cher was born 3 years after Jagger in 1946. She's had 2 children. There's only a 7-year age gap between her youngest and her oldest. She was 23 years old when she had her first child, 30 when she had her last child. Her net worth is $400 million. So here are her 2 children, Chaz Bono and Elijah Blue Almond, 2 different fathers here. Let's look at this again in a little bit more detail. Let's do a hypothetical. So conceivably, one guy can marry 10 wives, and this wasn't unusual in ancient times when there were harems. We have 10 wives here, one father. Conceivably, he could have 10 children with each one of his wives. Or in other words, oops, forgot that last one here, 100 children. That's a lot of kids. Contrast that to a woman, and a woman might conceivably have 10 husbands. Let's get all our husbands out here, front and center. There we go. Now, women can't have as many children over their lifespan as men. Let's say that this woman has 1 child with each husband, which is still a lot of kids for one woman to have, but she has an upper limit there and only will have 10 children. So you see why men are pushing for quantity, because that best suits their reproductive strategy. Whoops, missed a baby there. Women are looking for quality because they cannot produce as many children over their lifespan as a man can. Now, this comparison goes across other species as well. This is not just a human thing. Our class is primarily devoted to the discussion of human evolutionary concerns. But let's look at some record holders. Sultan Moulay Ismail of Morocco, circa 1645-1727. He had 4 wives and 500 concubines. A concubine is a woman that was essentially kind of a slave that he had sex with. Now, according to records that can be verified, he's produced 888 children. That's a lot of kids. Now, some individuals believe that Genghis Khan, the Mongol Lord Emperor, actually produced thousands of children. In fact, if you were to look at DNA in Eastern Europe, about 1/3 of all individuals in Eastern Europe have some genes that can be sourced back to Genghis Khan. But record keeping wasn't that great for the Mongols. They were too busy capturing cities and conquering places. Well, some people questioned whether Ismail could possibly have had 888 kids. Some German scholars did a simulation. They ran a series of simulations. But it looks like if Ismail would have had sex approximately 0.83 to 1.43 times the notion of statistics, how you can have sex 0.83 times, kind of blows my mind. He could have conceivably fathered 1,171 children in the 32 years of his reproductive life. Either way, that's a lot of kids. Father's Day had to be hard. Try remembering all of those birthdays. Now, I was able to find the world record holding woman in terms of number of offspring. And that was a woman who was a Russian peasant woman who was Mrs. Vassilyev, if I'm saying that at all correctly. In fact, her first name isn't even in any of the records. And the Guinness World Book of Records says that she is reputedly the most prodigious mother of all times. She had 27 pregnancies, gave birth to 16 pairs of twins, 7 pairs of triplets, 4 sets of quads, for a total of 69 children. Now, all but 2 of the babies survived infancy, which is an amazing phenomenon. Medical folks think that Mrs. Vassilyev could have probably had some kind of genetic predisposition to do what they say, hyper-ovulate, or release multiple eggs in one cycle. Well, take that, Octomom. So, we see the basic differences in the cost of reproduction. Men can indiscriminately mate with as many women as possible and produce lots of offspring. Women can produce very few. So males tend to be indiscriminate, play the quantity game. Women tend to be discriminating and play the quality game. That's something that's going to come up again and again in our discussions of human mating and relationships in this class. And so, as evolutionary theorists like to say, sperm is cheap. I have one final editorial comment for you that I just couldn't resist. When I was looking around for pictures, I found this little post-it thing, and it says politicians are like sperm. 1 in a million turn out to be a human being. Think about that, and we'll see you next time on Evolutionary Psychology. Bye now. This has been a We Have Couches video production. Copyright 2020, Professor Michael Botwin, all rights reserved.